On May 7, 2021, one of the largest refined fuel pipelines in the United States, the Colonial Pipeline, experienced a cyber attack that shut down fuel delivery between the Gulf Coast and the East Coast.
Colonial Pipeline paying a ransom to the criminal hackers who shut down their systems last week. Meanwhile, we saw the President of the United States ask today whether or not he had been briefed on the fact that Colonial Pipeline paid a ransom. The President declined to comment on it, so you get some sense of the sensitivity around this.
The U.S. government has a position on this. Both CISA at the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI strongly recommend organizations do not pay ransoms. Why? Because paying ransoms rewards ransomware hackers. Colonial Pipeline paid Darkside a ransom, we're told, of 75 bitcoins worth over $4 million at the time. Yesterday, the good news is the Department of Justice announced the recovery of 63.7 of those bitcoins.
I made the decision to pay, and I made the decision to keep the information about the payment as confidential as possible. It was the hardest decision I've made in my 39 years in the energy industry. I kept the information closely held because we were concerned about operational safety and security, and we wanted to stay focused on getting the pipeline back up and running.
It was the target of ransomware, a scheme where attackers seize control of the computer systems using code and then demand money to release the systems back to the company. The FBI blamed the attack on a group called Darkside.
Colonial chose to shut down its pipeline operations as a precautionary measure and to ensure that the ransomware could not migrate from business computer systems to those that control and operate the pipeline. Thus far, Colonial has told us that it has not suffered damage and can be brought back online relatively quickly, but that safety is a priority, given that it has never before taken the entire pipeline down.
The recent ransomware attack against Colonial Pipeline, which is responsible for nearly half of the gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and home heating oil for the eastern U.S., is the largest compromise of U.S. critical infrastructure to date. This was indeed likely the result of a ransomware infection by the now defunct Darkside group. It's the same case over and over as seen in past attacks. A phishing email, a misconfigured server, stolen credentials, or even third-party supply chain compromise are just a few scenarios that come to mind.
In the case of this particular legacy VPN, it did only have single-factor authentication. It was a complicated password, so I want to be clear on that. It was not a Colonial 123 type password. The investigation is ongoing by mandate to try to determine how that material was compromised. But in our normal operation, we use an RSA token allowance in order to create authentication difficulties for remote access. It was exfiltrated off the share drive, so it contains a lot of different type of material. The good news is it was retrieved very quickly. It was brought back in. We didn't know that it was just a cyber attack. We had to make sure that it wasn't potentially an attack on our physical structure as well. Our focus that first week was to restore the critical systems that we needed on the IT side in order to safely and securely bring our pipeline system back up. But up to this point, Mandiant has not confirmed any evidence that they were in the OT system, and typically that's not what Darkside does.
To your knowledge, the OT network, the Operational Technology Network, would not have been compromised by the attack if you hadn't have shut down. You shut that down as a safe precaution, security measure.
Senator, if there was 1% chance that that OT system was compromised, it was worth shutting the pipeline system down.
Part of what they were doing, I think, was shutting things down preventatively, making sure that there wasn't going to be any way that the bad guys, the hackers, could actually cause havoc within the system once they took it over.
It's not like the old days, right, where it's like a guy with a wrench opening it up. It's now all software. And so if you take control of the software, you can take control of the flow.
So how does the interdependence of OT and IT, as well as the IT-OT convergence, complicate industrial cybersecurity? OT needs IT to survive, especially with newly updated and connected OT being rolled out daily.
In the aftermath of the attack, panic buying, spurred by fears of fuel shortages and a rise in gas prices, left several gas stations with long lines as people hoarded gasoline. The attack itself exposed how vulnerable the U.S. energy infrastructure is.
Was this expected, or was there an expectation or hope that they could get around paying this or pay in a way where the perpetrators would actually be caught?
Well, there's been some real confusion around this point. Jen Psaki at the White House was asked several times yesterday whether or not the Colonial had paid, and she simply dodged the question, did not want to speak to it. Now, not clear again on the timing of all this, but it's possible that this payment was made well before the reporting that said that Colonial felt it didn't have to make a payment. So there are a lot of people saying a lot of things around this, and the facts we've got are a payment was made, but no timing associated with that.
And the private sector companies are really left to defend themselves. And on some of these sophisticated adversaries like nation states and organized crime groups, that is a very difficult proposition.
You know, yesterday the president signed an executive order to strengthen cybersecurity defenses in this country, but it does not include privately run infrastructure like oil and gas companies. And Gail, 80% of the energy infrastructure in this country is privately run. So you got to wonder how this executive order is going to make much of a difference at this point.
This is about ransomware attacks on critical infrastructure. These ransoms are not just on the company itself, typically. Increasingly, the hackers also pursue a two-pronged ransom approach where they download and threaten to release sensitive victim data. So individuals, say your customers, may also have been subject to ransomware.
Today, the company acknowledging it fell victim to a ransomware attack. While its pipeline system is now fully operational, it says that some personal information got compromised in the attack. The company is now working to notify the impacted people. It says most are current or former Colonial Pipeline employees.
The fuel is coming. That is the announcement this morning. And boy, doesn't it sound good? Haven't we all seen how hackers can disrupt things, drive up the price of gas, cause panic at the pumps? Now that it's restarted, how long should it take to get back to normal? 3, maybe 5 days. But it's back up and running.
There's a lot more work to be done to safeguard the U.S. power grid from cybersecurity threats.
Pair that with the fact that cyber criminals are getting smarter and faster, and thus so are the tools and tactics that they're using. Today it's a gas shortage, but I fear what tomorrow might be. At a recent Senate hearing, a top Biden administration cybersecurity official warned that cyber attacks on the nation's infrastructure are, and I quote, growing more sophisticated, frequent, and aggressive.
Colonial is responsible for safely returning the pipeline to service, and our role in the federal government is to take proactive steps to analyze the impacts of the shutdown on the delivery of gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel in states that are dependent on the pipeline, and to identify federal options for alleviating supply shortfalls should they develop.
If I could boil it down to 2 or 3 words of advice, I would suggest that we certainly take a look at our defenses, protect our assets. The sophistication of this threat grows every day, so let's make sure that we're keeping our eye on that. And then the other side of the equation is, if you wind up in a situation like we found ourselves on May 7th, have an emergency response process that allows you to respond quickly, and most importantly, to be extremely transparent and to contact the authorities who indeed do have resources that potentially could help you through a very, very difficult process.